Ready, sir?
Ready?
Take.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Yeah, thank you. So, welcome to day 5 of our GIAN course, and the lecture today is on data imputation. So, you have all seen some very interesting applications of medical imaging and how you can leverage, how you can use AI to address many concerns and many applications within the domain of medical imaging. So, when you talk about medical imaging, as we discussed yesterday, it is more about the diagnostics, right. So, whether there is a tumor or not, and if it is present, then what is the grade and all these things. So, so medical imaging applications where we use AI, they generally focus on diagnostics, whereas when we deal with time series data, it is more on the what, which application, therapeutics. Okay. So, when we talk about time series data, we focus more on the therapeutics. And another thing that you need to keep in mind, let me ask you a question. So, when we design devices for diagnostics, who do we actually design the device? Who is the target end user? Can you pass around the mic, please? Okay, one answer is pass around the mic, please. So, if we design for diagnostics, who are we generally making these devices for? Who is the end user?
For patients, for diagnosing the disease.
Okay, okay. Anything? Any other ideas?
People at risk of the disease.
Places, people?
People at risk of the disease.
At risk of the disease, people. Yeah. Okay, fine. Who are the real end users? Who do? Yeah, please.
For diagnostics, it might be doctors that
Correct.
would use it.
So, it is more of the doctors. There are certain point of care tests or certain point of care diagnostic kits that we design for patients. Like for example, a very common test that we have, this pregnancy test. So, it is mainly for people who want to know. So, it is the customer, it is not the clinician. Now, there are, when we talk about medical imaging, most of the applications that we make, that we design, they are designed for the doctors. So, that you need to keep in mind because accordingly that will drive your software design or app design or AI design, because your end user is a doctor. So, the interface that you will design, you have to keep in mind that it is for doctors. The terminology that you will be using, it will be for doctors. Okay. But when we talk about this time series data, we generally design these applications for the patients, okay, for their self monitoring. Okay. Of course, doctors can use these self monitoring devices, apps and AI models for their own purposes to improve the therapy of the patient, but it is mostly designed for patients. Okay. Now, when we talk about time series data, we will look at certain challenges that you will encounter if you design devices for processing and for processing time series data. So, let us have a look at some of these challenges and how generative models can be used to address these challenges. Okay. So, when I talk about generative models, what comes into your mind? What comes into your mind when I say generative models, generative AI models? What is in your mind? What do you think? What does the word
predicting certain outcomes?
Okay.
Like
okay.
Based on the past data that is being fed,
Yeah.
predicting certain outcomes, or like in the radiomics and pathomics we saw, radiology
Yes.
and pathology. So we can see that certain images that are there are some gaps in the images, to fill in those gaps.
Right.
So generating something new data points.
Okay. Okay, nice. Any other thoughts on when we talk about generative AI? What does it actually mean? What comes into your mind? Yeah.
So generative, the term itself says it used to generate things like I mean, actually it does the prediction.
Yeah.
Next word prediction given the set of sequences.
Yes.
But it's not kind of forecasting. It differs from
Yes.
forecasting. Is like we are just basically trying to map it to some defined set of parameters, right? But in generation, it's like it could be as I mean, there are separate classification again in these generative models, but it's like summarization or maybe the next sentence prediction or the missing token prediction. So all these comes under the generative.
Correct. So the reason I asked you this question is I wanted to create a distinction between forecasting and generative AI. So the models that we saw yesterday, it was mostly time series forecasting. Those are also generating new time points. But what is the difference between them? So the primary difference that you can say when we talk about the models, you can also use generative models to do time series forecasting, but their approach is different. So when we look at the time series forecasting models that we saw yesterday, they are mostly based on short term and long term memory or the interrelationships in a sequence. But this generative model that we are going to look at today, they are mostly dealing with probability distributions or probability density functions. So you have a certain probability density functions, you use your generative models to match that desired probability density function. So we will have a look at that briefly, but this is what you have in idea. And also I wanted to, since we have a very diverse audience, I wanted to just get your thought, since you have been listening to these lectures, I think it is a good time to summarize certain points in your mind about the lectures. So how do you think AI models work? It is a very basic question. What are the let us say if you think of a AI model as a box, okay, and you have different components, what would you think are the important components of an AI model? Yes, any ideas? Yeah, please pass the mic around. So these, I am trying to have sort of a discussion, so that because this is the last day, it is nice to form points and ideas in your mind. Yeah.
Sir, labeled data sets.
Right, data set is one of the important labeled data sets. Okay, anything else?
Pre-processing, proper pre-processing.
Okay, data sets which are pre-processed and like labeled. Okay,
labeled, but most of the cases, even if it is labeled from the clinicians, but that also we have to pre-process like while giving it to a model. Because that makes a lot of difference while feeding it to a model, and then creating a proper deep learning model which can give you the explainability, and then probably the proper inference which we can look into and trust and the explainability, and also like continuous monitoring of the model to development of, continuous development and continuous integration. You can say that like to make it as a CI/CD pipeline, like where you can continuously improve the model for the diagnostic precision.
Okay, very good. So these are some what all of you like pointed out. It's the data set which is very important. Without the data set, we cannot do any AI model training, and that is one of the reasons why you see so many AI applications oriented towards imaging, because we had recorded images for a very long time, and then when the AI revolution came and we started processing these images. Yeah, so data set is one of them. So if I ask you the question, or if you ask me the question, where should I use AI? So the answer is, if your problem meets these 3 points or criteria, then you could use AI. First of all, you should have some experimental data set about the problem that you want to solve. Okay. Second, there should be some interrelationships between the input and the output. Okay. There should be some interrelationships. So the image of a tumor and an image without a tumor should differ, and that there should be some interrelationship. Third, this interrelationships should be very complex. It should not be so simple that you can simply write a mathematical equation and solve it. Okay. So this complexity is also important. So if these 3 points are present, then you can apply AI to your application, and it makes sense to apply AI to a application. If let us say the interrelationship is simple to model, then there is no point applying AI, because you can write a mathematical model for that, and if the mathematical model works well, then so these are 3 points. One is the data set, the second is interrelationship, and third is complex interrelationship. So if these 3 exist, then it makes sense to apply AI to it. So most of the applications that you have seen until now, and you try to think, can I fit these 3 points to my applications, and you see that the answer will be yes, and that is why there is a drive for that. One more question, how do AI models work? What in your mind, since you have been listening to AI lectures and all this, how do you think AI models work? Let us say we have this 3 criteria, tick, 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 ready. Now you have a data set. How does your AI model work? Just basics, points. What is in your mind in a simple language?
Actually, sorry. So AI models try to establish the relationship between the features of the data set, or maybe attributes of the data set.
Yes.
And once it learns those learns those relationships, then it is like it is able to predict, or using the same relationship, it is able to provide you the next data points.
Good. So it's correct. So basically, so AI model, there is a process called training. So during the process of training, the AI model actually creates a relationship between the input and the output. So it creates this complex mathematical function. Let's say neural networks, you have hundreds and thousands of neurons. In each of these neurons, they create a mathematical relationship which actually maps the input with the output. Okay. So once this mapping is created automatically during the process of training. So how does it do that? So the reason I am emphasizing is this, because we are actually going to look at some of these points today. So the way it does that automatically is, there is something called as a loss function or a cost function. Okay. Throughout the process of training, when it is creating these interrelationships, it tries to minimize the loss or cost function. Okay. So similarly, different AI models will have different loss or cost functions. So you may have seen Sir's lecture where he is doing classification, then you will see that he is using terms like accuracy, precision, recall. So these are performance metrics. So the loss or cost function for a classification model is cross entropy or log loss, logistic regression. So similarly, if you are doing for let's say I have shown you some lectures yesterday. So there you see that there are certain parameters like MAE, mean absolute error, mean squared error, root mean squared error. So these are the loss function for regression models. Okay. So all these things, actually these loss functions, the objective during the process of training is to minimize the loss function. So how do we achieve minimum loss function? And that is what the AI model does. Inside the AI model, there are a variety of parameters, and it keeps on changing these parameters in a mathematical way. There are optimization algorithms, so such that the end result is that the loss is minimized. Okay. So in today's model, so a generative AI models also have many different, they also have a loss function. One of the popular loss functions is called as the KL divergence. So we can have a look at that later on, but let us see how these generative AI models work. What is the history behind generative AI models, how they all started. Okay. So give me an example of a generative AI model. Yes, ChatGPT, and that is
I mean GPT, Gemini, Claude. I mean there are sort of many of them.
But these models, they came around when, like the last couple of years, you would say, when ChatGPT came, right? But generative AI has been around for a very long time. So I will show you something else today. So before we go into depth with the generative AI model, I just wanted to give you a recap of what we discussed yesterday. So in our application of continuous glucose monitoring, generally we monitor glucose levels from the ISF, interstitial fluid, and in this interstitial fluid, we get the glucose from the blood, which is leaking out of the capillaries into the interstitial space. Essentially it is the plasma glucose that we are monitoring, and because of this origin and relationship with the blood vessel, we actually have a very strong correlation between the ISF glucose level and the blood glucose level. Okay. So if the blood glucose changes, ISF also follows, but there is a certain delay between that. Okay. So that is what we discussed in the last class. These are some CGM sensors. You have all seen these CGM sensors yesterday. You have seen, you have felt how they look like, and what is the weight and the variability and all these things. So what could be the possible issues when you are using CGM sensors? So if you look closely at this graph, you see, so these CGM sensors, they require a scanner, or you might have a Bluetooth connection. Okay. So if you look closely, you will see that there are certain missing data points here. Okay. There are missing data points. So if you look at the blue line, there are certain missing data points. So if you have these missing data points, your forecasting becomes very, very difficult, or there is a chance that you will miss out or you will make a incorrect prediction or incorrect forecast. And if you make it, so this is like a chain. If you make an incorrect forecast, it will affect your glucose insulin injections as well, and that will affect your patient. So it becomes very hard to maintain the closed loop control. So, that is why here we need to replace these missing data points. Okay. So, we have to replace this missing data points. So, if you look closely, they look like this. There are many missing data points here. It happens due to various reasons, could be due to sensor malfunction. Majority of the times it is due to, let us say I am wearing a Bluetooth sensor. It might be that my phone, it is connected to my phone or any other device, there is some data loss between the transmission. Okay. So, these missing data points, the question is how do we replace this missing data points? There are many different approaches. So, the challenge here is that you have to match the trend. So, you cannot just randomly put points here, you have to somehow ensure that the data points that you are generating, it should match the profile of the patient. It should not be generated in such a way that is away or very far away from the patient profile. So, this is where you can actually use Gen AI to create these missing data points. And there is a, it is not like we are applying a very complex model to a very simple task. This task is not simple because of the variability that is present across patient to patient. So, Gen AI is needed to capture this variability. Okay. Anyway, so let us have a look at this picture here. All of you please have a look at the picture. What is unique about this? Yes. So, it looks like a normal human face. Okay. You already knew the answer before. So, this face actually is not belonging to a real person. This has been generated by a GAN, a generative model, generative adversarial network. Okay. So, there is a website called this person does not exist. So, you can Google it, and this website you can, it is quite interesting. As you refresh the pages, every time a new face is generated. So, the only way you can recognize, okay, this face is generated, if you look closely at the edges, there is something funny. So, this is quite good, this model particularly. So, this model actually came very early. So, even before ChatGPT, okay, it was there before ChatGPT. So, I used to generally in class I say that for us it is easy for us to generate text, write text, okay, but for AI models it is easy for them to generate faces, images. Okay. It is less challenging for them to generate AI model, for AI models to generate faces. Okay. So, that is why this is a generative AI model called Style GAN, which is actually generating human faces, and the way it generates is quite, it is amazing actually. You cannot distinguish between a real human face and a person who does not exist, like the AI has generated this face. So, you can actually choose anything, gender, age, ethnicity, whatever, and then refresh the image and it will generate accordingly based on your input. Okay. So, this was actually done by something called as Style GAN. So, this AI model is known as Style GAN. Okay. So, GAN stands for Generative Adversarial Network. So, GAN, this is Generative Adversarial Network. So, these networks were actually developed a while back, around 2016, 17, even much before ChatGPT. Okay. So, for AI models generating a sequence of text, it is much harder to model that, okay, compared to generating images. So, in this way you can actually see, so how does this GAN actually work, what is the history behind GAN. So, actually this GAN was developed by a person called as Ian Goodfellow. So, he did it as part of his PhD apparently, from what I heard. So, this GAN model was developed by him as part of his PhD to generate faces, and it is actually quite interesting. How does the GAN work? So, if you look closely, there is a synthesis network. Okay. So, you can say this is a generator, and then you have a discriminator. So, then you have a discriminator which actually looks at the generated data and filters out whether this is the right data or wrong data. Okay. So, that is why we call it, so you have a generative component and then you have an adversary which is actually filtering out the real and fake data. So, this is where actually when you are generating these faces, then you have a loss function. So, you generally we have this kind of model generally when we are training the AI model. So, this is how actually training looks like. So, we will go back to the loss function again. So, essentially this is when we talk about the loss function. So, this is our loss function, let us say loss. So, with every training process the loss is actually minimized until it reaches a minimum value and it cannot go beyond that. Okay. So, this is the process of training, model training. So, loss actually is minimized as we change the different parameters inside the model, and this happens automatically. Okay. I just wanted to give you some idea about it. So, moving on. So, this is the work by Ian Goodfellow. So, he is I would say one of the pioneers in generative AI. So if you look at the image, this image actually nicely shows. So, you have a discriminator which is like this, and then you are generating different data points. Okay. So, this works, this is in various steps. The discriminator ensures that in the end the generated sequence, which is the green line, matches with the dotted line. Okay. So, you can also look at this as a probability distribution, where you are generating a certain number of points which has a certain probability distribution. You keep on discriminating and removing the points until it matches a certain probability distribution. So, that is how actually a GAN model works. So, in a GAN you will have noise. So, generally we have a component which generates noise, which is like random number of points. Then this is fed into the generator. This is an AI model. So, generator will generate data points, and then we have a discriminator. And this tells us whether this is real or whether this is fake. Okay. So, the real points are retained. If the points are fake, then this information is again fed back to the generator. So, accordingly the generator is trained in such a way that it maximizes the chance or ability to generate real data, and this is the approach behind generating faces. So, you have a feature vector and you have a latent vector, and your latent vector tries to match the feature vector. So, the AI model actually tries to train itself in such a way that this matching actually happens. So, the good thing about here is that if you look at this, in statistics we have this theory that if the probability distributions of 2 points belong to, so let us say you take 2 samples, okay, and if these samples belong to the same population, then they will have the same probability distribution, they belong to the same probability density function. Okay. So, in this way, so this same approach here, let us say now let us step back. If you think of face, the spatial distribution of pixels in the face, they must also follow certain sort of probability distribution or density function. So, your GAN is essentially complex enough to generate and map the probability density function of the face. So, this distribution, the spatial distribution of pixels, intensity of a face, the GAN is able to map this multi-dimensional probability density function very nicely, and that is why it is able to generate the face such accurately. So, the position of the nose, ear, eyes, they are at the right position, they are not mixed up, okay, because it has very nicely modeled the probability density functions of the pixel and spatial distributions of the face. Clear? So, this actually tells us that the GAN is a very powerful model, and we can probably apply this GAN to our application, where if we think like if we think in this manner, if we go towards a slightly more clinical application. So, you can see that, okay, if you think of more of a clinical application, so you can see that every patient data will follow a certain probability distribution. So, you can train a GAN model on a patient data to match the patient's probability density function. So, that is how you can actually replace the missing points by mapping this probability density function. Okay. So, with this in mind, so not only that, not only patient, there was another work which they call it as time GAN. So, initially most of the GAN model development was in the field of imaging. So, around 2018 I think 2019 2020, So, the researchers in actually UCLA and University of Cambridge, they came up with this concept called time GAN. So, where they actually started generating time series data. Okay. So, in this also time series data, so you have three different types of loss: unsupervised loss, supervised loss, and reconstruction loss, and you combine the functionality of these three losses during the process of training to map and create the probability density functions that are present inside a time series data. So, if you have, let us say, stock data and some points are missing and you want to replace them, then you can do that. Okay. So, this time GAN is one of the earliest models which work on time series data, generating time series data. Now, coming to our application. So, this paper was around 2021. So, this paper was around 2021. So, if you look at most of the if you look at most of the diabetes data, let us say the CGM data, and let us say you have three classes: hyperglycemia, normal, and hypoglycemia. Which is the majority class? Normal. So, most of the time you would see that the number of points in the normal would be more. So, this scientists here in this paper, what they have done, it's a good paper in Nature Digital Medicine. So, what they wanted to do is they wanted to predict whether a person is going to, they are not doing time series forecasting, they are doing classification, meaning they want to predict whether a person will be hypoglycemic, hyperglycemic, or normal in the next 1 hour. Okay. So, in order to do that, for their application, naturally they face the problem of majority and minority classes, because you would have lot of normal data points and very less hyperglycemia and even lesser hypoglycemia. Generally hypoglycemia is even less. So, they used this time GAN, they use this time GAN to create or balance out the different types of classes, and then they use different AI models to do classification. So, they also have shown evidence that if you use only without any augmentation, data augmentation, if you use only the data that is present, and then how does it perform if you mix real and augmented data, and they do all these sort of different applications and try to show that if you use a mixture of real and augmented data, then your model is actually model performance, classification performance actually improves. Okay. So, this is where we start to see the application of generative AI models in the field of diabetes management or closed loop diabetes management. So, coming to our application, so how can we use this? So, this is more of a classification of approach. Okay. So, our application is more of time series forecasting. So, what to do there? So, this is our overall system where we have different inputs. So, we have the CGM sensor, insulin, meal, and physical activity. So, all these 4 inputs, there are chances that you might have missing data points in all these 4 inputs. Okay. So, if you remember insulin, like a patient, let us say we were discussing about that, okay, we can estimate what is the carbohydrate content in a meal. So, the patient has to manually enter that. Let us say they forget to enter this CHO value. So, what to do? Let us say there is some sensor malfunction and for a short amount of time you are missing some data points. Short amount of time means here, because the sampling rate of this, because the rate at which the data points are created in a CGM sensor is either 5 minutes or 15 minutes. So, if you miss out 4 points, that means you are missing 1 hour of data. Okay. So, you might have some missing data points, or you might have some missing data points in insulin. Maybe if the patient is manually entering this insulin value, they might miss it out. You might also have missing data points in physical activity. Let us say the patient was wearing band and they may have removed it for some time for some reason and they forgot to put it on, and there is some missing data points of physical activity. So, in this way you can have missing data points and that actually affects your forecasting performance. Okay. So, we are going from a macro to micro level where we are looking at small problems that can occur in the entire system. So, as we build on the system. Okay. So, this is where actually we can use time GAN sequence or you can say generative AI models to fix the missing data points. So, if you look at the plot in the bottom left corner, you have missing data points and this is CGM data. So, if you have missing data points, it is very difficult to forecast accurately what is going to happen next. Okay. So, in this case we have this time GAN sort of generative model, where we have where we have a generator and a discriminator. So essentially what we did was, in this work we tried to evaluate, so LSTM stands for long short term memory. So LSTM is very good in retaining long term memory, and GRU are very good in actually they are solving some problems of LSTM also. So we explored if in the generator and discriminator, let us say AI models that we use for generator and discriminator. So we found out that if we use LSTM for long sequences generation, so if you are missing data points, very large number of data points, then if you want to generate a long sequence of missing data points, then you use LSTM as a generator, and if you are missing actually a short, then you use GRU. So by using a combination of these two and tying it to the number of points that are supposed to be generated, we were able to actually map the generated points quite nicely. So essentially you will have this sort of a profile here, where if there are missing data points, the GAN model will actually replace the missing points. And then you can actually use the instead of using the time series data with missing data points, you can use this combination of synthetic and real points to actually train your AI model or forecasting model, and to actually improve the forecasting accuracy. Yeah, this is where actually you can do, so how well your synthetic data point matches with the original data. This is why you can do this, you can use PCA and TSNE. So these are two different statistical methods. So you can see how well these two probability distributions are matching. So if you look at this plot well, so if you look at these plots closely, then the blue actually represents the synthetic data and the red represents the original data, and they are kind of overlapping. So you will see this detail much more in the later slides. So here as well you see that we have actually we have a CGM sensor data where there are a number of points which are missing, and we cannot train an AI model for forecasting with missing data points. So what do? We do some sort of a pre-processing step where we find out what are the missing points, whether it is a long sequence of data which is missing or a short sequence, and based on that we use the trained GAN model to replace this missing data points, and then we train this combination of synthetic plus real CGM data, and this we can use it to train forecasting models. So this is in the step of training. So you can also use it in real time, but we have not been able to apply it yet. So mostly we are actually doing, if we have a data set where, because we are actually making these AI models personalized. Yesterday I have shown you some results that if you personalize your AI model to a specific patient, then their performance, the MARD value is maintained, otherwise it increases. So if you want to maintain this personalization, then it is important to actually train your AI models with data points which are full, and there are no missing data points in between. So this is where actually we have been successfully using the GAN models to actually replace the missing data points. So this is a much more detailed image. So if you look at different PCA and TSNE analysis, so you can actually see that the overlap is quite nice. So any points if you go through, you will see that the GAN model is able to map the synthetic data with the original data well, and it performs quite nicely. So this gives us confidence that you can actually use these AI models to actually start mapping the missing data points. Instead of using traditional approaches, you can use this. Right. So not only for only can you replace missing CGM data, you can also train your GANs to replace CHO values. CHO stands for the carbohydrate content. Okay. So these carbohydrate content values, let's say a patient has forgotten to provide or enter the carbohydrate content of their meal, and in a closed loop system you can actually replace this based on their daily habits. So let's say on the previous 8-day data, your GAN has spotted that there are certain intervals only where a patient is taking certain type of meals, then you can actually replace that. You can also replace insulin values. Let us say if you have, if you are taking insulin and you want the patient to manually enter the insulin values, that also you can do. Not only that, you can also replace physical activity data, heart rate, steps. If you are missing any of these values, you can nicely actually replace these values with the synthetic data, and they map quite nicely. So overall, we actually tested whether there is any impact of short sequence generation and long sequence generation. So we found out that you get better discriminative score if you go for if you become selective and you go for long sequence generation using LSTM and short sequence generation using GRU, then you get better discriminative score. This is what is shown here in this table. The same analysis is true not only for CGM data, it is also true for physical activity data, and this was actually tested on the Ohio type 1 diabetes data set. The previous paper which I had shown you, the classification Nature Digital Medicine paper, they also use the Ohio type 1 data set. So the reason we go for this data set is that this data set is standard across AI models, so it is very good to compare with them. Okay, now coming to something interesting here. So you see that we have two different columns here. One is data set with missing data points and augmented data set. So if you look at their performance, it's actually better. So here also same thing, but different. I think this is for different. So you have two different type 1 diabetes, 2018 and 2020. So if you compare the performance, if you look at MARD, so you can see clearly here that the MARD of the augmented data set is lower here as well. So this is for a prediction horizon of 60 minutes. So if you are doing forecasting for 1 hour, then you see that it's close to 10%, which is the desired value. Okay. So if you don't go with the and even lower for the 2020 data set. So here if you go for this one, it's 12. So it is 9.9. Anyway, so it is less than 10%, which is the desired MARD value for in these applications. So all in all, it tells us that augmentation helps. Now the question arises, how much augmentation is good? So there is no clear answer to that. Okay. So there was a recent paper. I forgot to bring it. I thought of bringing it as a printout and circulating it amongst you, but I can share it as a link. So in that actually they have looked at how your LLM performance, whether it. So if let's say you are training your LLM. Let's say you have a model like ChatGPT, how well this LLM performance actually improves or degrades if you train your LLM on generated data. Okay. So what they have found out that if you consistently train your LLM on generated data, then the LLM performance actually collapses. Okay. So that is why you always should have a healthy mixture of synthetic and real data. It should not be 50-50. My suggestion, my advice to you based on my experience, I have not done an extensive study on this, but based on my experience is that you keep majority of your data as real data and you can add some synthetic data. So it will be better than only real data. So if you have a mixture, majority let us say real data, less synthetic data, then you can improve your performance. But if you consistently train your AI models on synthetic data, even if you, so in that paper they have actually looked at, let us say you consistently increase the amount of synthetic data, actually your LLM performance actually goes down. So this is in the domain of text generation, NLP and all these things, but I suspect that this might also be true for applications such as this, where you are generating time series data or images. So it's always good to have a mixture of real data and synthetic data, where the amount of real data is more than the synthetic data. This is just as a recommendation. You can do further exploration in this direction and kind of figure out what is the best ratio or proportion, and it's a good scientific study and it's an idea for a paper. Right. So as we continue, we consistently see that let's say we take this WD net model. So here we have generated the AI data and then we look at different AI models. So we see that the MARD value is lower if we go for augmentation. Okay. So wherever we, so we see that the MARD value is lower with augmentation compared to no augmentation, which actually validates us our original hypothesis. So our original hypothesis was that the model performance will go down and but we did not know that whether augmentation will improve it or not, but this is how we validated. Our hypothesis was that augmentation will improve. So, this actually this study shows us that augmentation does improve your AI model performance. So, most of the work has been done in images, as we have seen, improving the quality of image and all these things, but here we use it for time series data mostly. So, now so if you look at now the question is, so the question was whether the approach, the model that we use, how does it work, like the generative model that we developed, how does it perform in comparison to time GAN. So, there is one paper here where they actually used time GAN to generate or augment data sets. So, you see that the performance or the discriminative score is lower if you go for this selective approach, where you use different models for based on the size of the sequence that you are generating. So, if you change your discriminator model and generator model based on the sequence, the size of the sequence, then it leads to better performance. Okay. So, in the previous work they have used the same generator and discriminator for irrespective of the sequence size, but if you change your AI model, discriminator model and generator model based on the size of the sequence like we did, it actually improves, helps improve. And the architecture, we also use 4 different losses, reconstruction loss and all that. We can discuss that in detail maybe off the lecture when if you have any questions, but essentially doing this approach actually helps in improving the discriminative score. So, lower the discriminative score, the better it is. So, there are other metrics also, like predictive score also is used. So, you see that with the predictive score it is lower compared to previous work, right. So, in order to conclude, so the conclusion is that GAN based time series data imputation is possible and it helps in improving performance. However, now as we discussed yesterday, there are issues related to security, where ideally you want the models to be present on the edge device, but that is the issue, that deployment of GAN models on edge device is tough because they use lot of resources to train, computational resources. So, so if you look at what are the 3 components, let us say you have made an AI model. So, the 3 components that you always should keep in mind is number 1 data set, number 2 computational power, and number 3 memory. So, if you have a very large data set or very good data set, if you have very large computational power and if you have large memory to support it, then you are in a very good position. So, so generally if you are an AI researcher, you try to solve any of these 3 problems. Okay. So, some people try to augment or work on data set problems, some people try to work on the computational power problem. Let us say there people are developing models which can run on edge devices, they try to improve it as we have seen in the earlier lectures. And the last one also, so the last one where you work on the memory, it is more of a hardware problem. So, I have seen lot of hardware engineers, IC design engineers, they try to develop memory, small size memories where you can pack more data. Okay. So, these are the different trends and directions in which research is going on. So, it is up to you where you choose to be, where you want to make an impact. I am sure everyone has a capability to make an impact, so you can choose your area. Okay. So, that is all for today's lecture. I thank my team, of course, without which it would not have been possible to make this, prepare this. So, if you have any questions you can ask, otherwise we can. So, I guess yeah please yeah. Yeah.
Sir, here we are trying to fill the missing points, right? Like, so one thing, basic question, like we can use interpolation, like because the points, if it is very small gap is there, we can obviously like go for like time interval is 15 minutes or 10 minutes. But one more thing, like if it is long duration, like 1 hour, 2 hour, that might be problematic.
So, if you think of like 1 hour, it's essentially generating 4 points, or if you think of like 5 minutes is the. So, generally we have seen that you using LSTM, if you read the paper, then for like 1 hour 2 hour generation you can actually use GRU as a generator and a discriminator, and if you have let's say 40-50 points to generate up to beyond 80 points, you go for an LSTM generator and discriminator. And coming back to your question of the whether you can use interpolation or not, people have tried that, but the discriminative score and the TSNE, if you do the PCA and TSNE mapping, it's not good. So because this is where what happens is, typically if you look at this problem, people think that okay, it's a very I also used to think this, that it's a very simple problem, it's just a time series data, but the complexity and so you have to think about the origin of data. So the data origin is complex because the glucose levels are actually affected by multiple factors. So like I said, food, stress, physical activity, circadian rhythm, so it's affected by multiple factors. So all these factors are actually very hard to capture within a simple interpolation model. Okay, so that's what you can also use ARIMA and all this regression models to generate data points, but the problem is that people have tried that, and if you look at the the mapping, it's not that good. Okay, so that's the thing. So sometimes it happens that that's the complexity of the problem is much more than we think, and we are not able to solve or go down to that micro level and create these relationships and try to create a much more robust model. So that's why we rely on something like a GIAN, which is a you can say it's like a very massive computing system which can model all complexities. It may be little bit overkill, yes, but still better than the normal. Yeah, I remember one. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Done. Okay. 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 So thanks for that. Okay. So a few other things that we can look into. If you look at this diabetes, problem where you are CGM, where you are using CGM sensors, what do you think? If you are using CGM sensors, what do you think? What do you anticipate is the problem? Like if you are to use, do you have any thoughts about, like, if let's say I want to use let's say you want to adopt this CGM sensor and use it, what do you think can be problems that you can encounter? Let's say I ask you to wear a CGM sensor, what will prevent you from wearing? What is your, so it's more of a discussion, then we discuss these points, brainstorm and try to figure out whether this is a problem worth solving or not. Let's see.
Sir, people with subcutaneous fat like sweat glands are very active, so
okay,
some people have, so it will be very much problematic to stick there for very long time.
Okay,
so it is a real time problem, I guess.
Okay, so another problem also I have seen, form factor also. So another problem that I have seen is sometimes for some reason certain, you want to say something? No, certain sensors actually even after implantation they don't start. I also don't know what is the reason. So what happens is, I spoke to someone who is much more experienced in this. So he said that basically it is you have to do the implantation on the right location where the company actually recommends that you implant it. So if it is slightly off, maybe it is in, if it ends up in the you can say fat, or maybe not in the muscle, sometimes it stops working, it's not working. So the first implantation generally has to be done by someone who is experienced, who has done it multiple times, so they know the exact location where you should actually implant it. Yeah, that is a valid, but generally nowadays it is asked that you implant in the bicep region, not in the abdomen. So previously people used to make tricep region than in the abdomen, because maybe because of the abdominal fat or anything, it could be or sweating, whatever. Yeah.
What if the people are like physically challenged, like amputated, kind of, like let's say if you are talking about putting it in the tricep, what if their arms are like not there, like still they are having like body fat,
So the percentage of body fat over here is relatively less.
No, that's what I'm telling. Like if they don't have the hands, like if
oh,
they're
okay,
physically
I understand.
disabled.
Like if there there's some problem with
there are
amputation.
cases like
yeah.
Then like where do you prefer? I know it's an extreme case, but
Yes.
in medical there are no extreme cases.
Yeah, true. So the alternative is of course the abdomen. If let's say still you are not comfortable with the
Say
abdomen.
if they are having like bodily fat.
So in theory, you can actually implant this wherever your ISF is accessible. You can in theory implant it. So let's say you can implant it on the muscle on the leg also. That also works. Yeah, but
Calf
how?
muscle.
Huh?
Calf
Calf
muscle.
muscles. Yeah, calf muscles. But how well it will work towards like for a long duration of time, whether it is comfortable or not. These are some questions that
maybe
need to be answered.
it might change like from 14 days to like 1 week or something like that.
Yeah, that is possible. Yeah. So previously, all these sensors actually, there is also another problem which we have not discussed within this course. It's called auto calibration. So auto calibration, like I discussed with you yesterday. So when you once you implant the sensor, the sensitivity of the sensor changes over time. You cannot prevent that. That means the conversion factor actually changes. So if you use these sensors, the data that you get is already the converted value. Okay. So there is an idea that you can actually auto calibrate these sensors, meaning you can use AI models to model the deposition of biofouling agents on the sensor surface. So how does the sensor degrade inside the body? So that also you can use some AI models. So that aspect we haven't discussed in the course or in the lectures because it was slightly off the topic. So it is more going into biosensors, but you can also let's say like we discussed that okay, the sensitivity will degrade and the difference between the blood glucose level and the CGM reading will increase naturally over the period of days, but you can make it ensure that they are closer by changing the sensitivity automatically, okay, without calibration. So that's why some of the earliest CGM sensors, they ask the user to calibrate at least twice a day. Twice a day they have to take their blood glucose reading and try to map it, and they have to enter it in the app so that the difference is actually adjusted. But nowadays most of the sensors, because the degradation rate of the sensitivity is so low or less within the 14 days, it remains within the FDA approved guidelines. So it's not a problem. So they say that okay, you can use it. There are also other issues like when somebody comes to the market with the sensor, the question is whether can you use this sensor with an insulin pump, whether you can use the sensor value for making clinical decisions, critical decisions like insulin dosing. So generally, let's say Medtronic, they recommend their own sensor to be used with their own pump generally. So this cross, across different sensor from a different company and in pump from a different company is generally not recommended. So there are certain aspects to that. Yeah.
So the companies providing the CGM sensor,
Yeah.
so don't they also publish the decay rate of the sensor, like at what rate it will have the decay?
I haven't come across.
Okay, so I mean, or do we know? Do we have any kind of scientific research which talks about whether that decay varies across sensors, or I mean, or what are the rate at which those deposits can be? Can happen on those sensors?
It can be done, but probably for legal reasons nobody has done it yet.
Okay.
There are some limitations to that. For example, there is a certain company, I won't name it, but if you can only buy their sensors through a doctor for patient use, a researcher cannot buy this. So when you are buying them, you have to actually mention the reason and all these things, or they will only sell through a doctor. So for this, there are certain legal reasons why this has not been published and not public knowledge.
And coming to the question that you asked, like what are the problems that as a patient, a patient can face. So I'm not sure if those sensors can cause some irritation or.
Yes. So it's actually like my PhD student was doing data collection regularly. So in certain patients, actually, it does cause some irritation. It's not from the sensor actually; it's from the glue that is on the sensor. So to attach with the skin, after some time they feel little bit of itching and redness. So not because of the sensor per se, but because of some people might be allergic to the glue that is being used. And one more thing I wanted to address. Anything else, please?
No, I mean, my further question was like those CGM sensors, like I mean, how it has to be used? For example, you said calibration has to be done.
Yeah, no. So previous companies actually, a previous sensor, like let's say version 1 of the sensors, they recommended that once you implant it, twice a day you have to do blood glucose reading and enter it in an app. So it's a form of 1-point calibration or 2-point calibration. Yeah. But nowadays they don't recommend that. So they call it factory calibrated. So the word is factory calibrated, and you don't have to calibrate it, because they ensure that the sensitivity does not degrade so much that the reading will go beyond the FDA approved guidelines of the error, the MARD.
But so again, there will be some assumptions, right? Whether
yes.
that, imagine if it is time based,
yeah.
and the patient hasn't, is not using that CGM device for maybe 1 hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
Still, the actual, if they are counting the time, so the actual factor will be less, but actually the sensor is intact.
Yes. So sensor is being used. So actually there is no relation between, there is no relationship between whether a person is scanning or not and the sensor degradation. Sensor will degrade, like the biofiling will happen irrespective of whether anybody is scanning or not.
No. I'm asking if the CGM device is not implanted.
Yeah.
Let's say it has been maybe removed for an hour or maybe.
You cannot re-implant it. It's
okay.
one-time use.
Okay, so it's like once you have implanted, you cannot reuse.
You cannot. Yeah.
Okay.
You cannot re-implant it. It's for one-time use. So that is one of the reasons why actually, because in a country like India, where the recurring cost to the consumer is like 10,000 every month. So 14 days, 28 days. Maybe one of the reasons is this probably cause for low adaptation, but nowadays it's increasing.
And then don't they have kind of detachable kind of sensors where the electronic module still remains same, but the
yes, that's a good actually. So far there have been any sensors where it is detachable, so they ask you to throw it away. There could be some concerns regarding security issues, or maybe I don't know why, but it's a good idea that you can actually remove the sensor. One of the Nature Biomedical Engineering papers where they discuss this multi-analyte sensing, they have had this idea, or they have proposed this idea, where you have a detachable electronics and a sensor which is like disposable. So disposable sensor and reusable electronics. But I haven't seen any such solutions in the market. Not clear why. What is the reason for that? What we have. Maybe there are concerns about reverse engineering, all these things. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Yeah.
Or maybe in terms of profitability, they would.
Could be profitability. Yeah. That's all. Okay. So yeah, that's all yeah. One more thing, like when I was initially looking into this field, so I thought that okay, if we can come up with some materials kind of work, materials research and biosensing research, so that we can increase the sensor lifetime from 14 days to 30 days. Then I spoke to a couple of patients just who are using this. So they said that keeping the same sensor without removing for more than 14 days is also a little bit uncomfortable. So they like it to use it on one arm, remove it, and implant the next on the other arm. So there's also another, since we are talking about user experience, it could be useful to mention. Yeah. So that's all. Thank you very much. The next lecture will be by Professor Prateek. Are we taking a tea break or? Yeah. So we'll break for tea and then resume after tea. Thank you very much.
Please take your seats. We'll get started. Okay, so good morning again, and welcome to the lecture you've been all waiting for. Not because of what will be covered, but because it's the last lecture. So yeah, so congrats that we've all made it through to day 5. Over the last 4 days and the first session today, we have seen and we have heard a lot about the different techniques. Today morning, Dr. Baig spoke to you all about how generative AI can be used for imputation when you have missing data. And over the first 3 days, we saw how radiology and pathology images have been used in conjunction with different kinds of AI models, whether it is more traditional handcrafted machine learning or more advanced deep learning techniques. How can we use these routinely acquired images, these routinely acquired data for developing biomarkers, right? So eventually the goal, at least for the imaging part, is to develop these quantitative imaging biomarkers that can help provide some additional information and holistic characterization about diseases, which a lot of times is not possible just by looking at these images alone. So what we have slightly touched upon, but what we'll cover in more detail today is the ethical aspect, right? So a lot of times, and that also holds good for the interpretability and explainability portion of what we covered. Train our models, but we do tend to forget about who the end users are. And if you remember, so this is the theme that we have been constantly trying to put into you, right? Think about who the end users are. Think about who the stakeholders are. And today we'll sort of formalize that, and just to come a full circle, we'll have this lecture on ethics in medical AI. So recap of what we have been covering so far, and this is not just confined or restricted to the medical imaging domain, but in general to, let's say, any other domain in medicine where AI is being used nowadays or will be used in the future. So we start with data sourcing. So in data sourcing, the company or the vendor, the machine learning scientist, the data scientist, we obtain data sets from a healthcare organization to train the machine learning component of the system. Now, the questions that we have to think about and the questions that we have to address here: first, how does a company assess the conditions for data use? Next, is the company compliant with data protection rules in the country? And we'll see in the course of the next few slides, the data protection rules are different from one country to another, right? So US has its own rule, EU has its own rule, India also has its own rules. Within that, we need to ask the question, if the data set that has been acquired for model training, model validation, if that includes sensitive data, PHI, that responds to special regulatory provisions such as genetic data, for example. So once the data has been sourced, and we have been hearing about how data needs to be pre-processed, annotated, and so on, the next stage is the product development. And this is where the product, the algorithm is developed, it's validated, and it's solidified, right? So by that, what I mean is, we need to get that confidence that the model really works, and it's just not the model. So if it's eventually integrated into a UI, that's something that's that's very intuitive, and clinicians are ready to use that. Now, while developing this, we need to ask questions as to if the training data accurately represents the source population, and we have discussed this multiple times. We'll probably touch upon this a few times again in the next few slides. Is it representative of the target population? Does it cover all the possible variability as much as possible? Then can developers explain the logic, how the algorithm works? And it doesn't, by that I don't mean can you explain to the clinicians the math behind it. Like they don't need to understand what backpropagation is, right? But you need to tell them what data the model was trained on, where is it making mistakes, and simplify to them how the decision is being made by the model. And then what kind of evidence supports the safety and the efficacy of the device. So finally, after the product has been developed, we come to the deployment stage, and we saw multiple checklists yesterday that we need to consider when deploying a particular model or a particular software in the clinic. So first, have doctors been consulted? The questions that we can ask here: first, if the doctors have been consulted about the introduction of the device in clinical practice. Are the patients informed about the use of the system? So this is very important. I think I was having this discussion with, I don't remember who, but you told me that some of your relatives, they went to an ophthalmologist to get tested, and you could see on the screen that the system actually gave maybe the grade of the disease, if it was diabetic retinopathy or something, but the doctor did not really tell them that there was a system like this, that's there on that machine where the fundus image is taken, right? So this is almost trying. I mean, I'm not saying that they're hiding information. Maybe the doctor thinks that okay, this is okay to not divulge to the patient, but if there is something like this that is being used in clinical practice, the patient should know about it because it is their data that the model is being trained on. Do patients have equitable access to targeted therapies? And this again, this is a little bit of a touchy topic because obviously there's a lot of healthcare is not equitable nowadays, and it's not like we are any close to healthcare being equitable. You have high income places, you have low middle income places where there is a differential, let's say, access to the different healthcare resources that are there, right? But to the best extent possible, we have to ensure that patients have equitable access to targeted therapies. Now, what monitoring mechanisms are in place to assess the performance of the device in real life testing, in a real life setting? So if you remember, one of the topics that we covered yesterday was once a model has been deployed, you can't just forget about the model. Right? There has to be post-deployment monitoring of how that model is performing, because new data sets will come in, scanners will change, scanners will keep getting better, which means the quality of the image will change, and if the quality of the image changes, then there is bound to be distribution shift, right? So if there is distribution shift, then it's evident that the model will not work the way it was intended to work, right? So that means that there has to be continuous monitoring, and one of the questions that was raised yesterday was, can the hospitals, can the clinical end users provide feedback to the vendors, not in just terms of whether, how good, how well the software, how well the AI model is performing, but also send them data regarding, potential false positives or false negatives or corner cases. And is there a provision for the data scientists, for the machine learning engineers to ingest that data into fine tuning, into slightly changing their model so that now when the new data comes into the hospital, it will work better than how it did previously, right? So these kinds of things have to be taken care of. Now, AI in radiology, ophthalmology, and pathology, we have seen how they support faster and more accurate diagnostics. Up to date, and the figure is a little bit more than this nowadays. FDA has approved more than 1,000 AI-enabled medical devices, and many of them are in imaging. And most of this approval has come about in the last half a decade or so. Right? We are just beginning to scratch the surface of this. And no doubt, medical imaging is improving with the use of AI. So much so that there have been studies that have shown that AI's clinical performance can match or even be better than that of experts. Now, all of this is good. We have great AI models. Some of them are better than experts. Some of them are being used in conjunction with experts to make decisions better, make decisions faster. But bottom line, AI has an ethics problem. Now, as data scientists, as machine learning engineers, we all need to understand the main pillars of AI ethics. Now, you look at these 5 different pillars here. We have fairness and non-harm. We have data protection, human autonomy and control, transparency and explainability. Right, and we have covered transparency and explainability in quite some detail over the past day or so. Now let's talk about the three ethics on the top row. So fairness and non-harm. What does that mean? So what does fairness mean? Anyone? fairness of a model. What does that mean?
Non-bias, not biased. Having not biased, the data set should not, the prediction should not be biased depending on the data set.
Okay, and then what are the factors that could cause this bias? So there's a hand there. So.
So fairness means, I think, the like telling the wrong thing about like false claiming.
So that's probably non-harm, right? So fairness is, it's about bias. So so let's say that there are different representative populations. We should make sure to the best extent possible that the AI model performs equally well. The performance should be equally good or equally bad on all representative populations, right? So that's the fairness aspect. So it should not cause harm. That was your answer. So ideally, or in the best case scenario, not in the best case scenario. So this is what AI models should actually do. They should help improve, let's say, quality of life, right? Which means that there has to be tests done before the models are deployed in the clinic to make sure that there is no harm that comes to the patient because of the deployment of the AI model. And there's so what comes to mind when you see data protection, which is the second pillar? Anyone? What does data protection mean? Can you just provide it?
Privacy of the patient.
Okay, can you provide some more detail? What do you mean by that, privacy of the patient?
Privacy is diagnosis kind of thing. What kind of diagnosis?
No. So what do you mean by privacy? So you're saying that data protection means, let's say, protecting the privacy of the patient, right?
Name.
So
his name.
What situations could arise where the privacy of the patient is not maintained?
In the sense, name, age, and those all should not be compromised with other third-party vendors.
Right.
So that they can use that data for other purposes, for mischievous data, for other mischievous things. They
right.
cannot.
What could be some of the mischievous things?
That could be which is harmful to the patient.
Yeah.
That kind of data which is very critical for the patient, critical information of the patient should not be shared with any other else.
Right. So right. Yeah, good. So just think about this, right? So privacy doesn't just mean the name of the patient. Even if your phone number, and it's very critical nowadays, especially in a country like India, if there is leakage of this information, you could have unscrupulous elements getting access to this, and this can lead to a lot of problems. And we have seen this over the last few years. And not just that, it's not just how these unscrupulous elements have access to data. Even so, think about it. Insurance companies, right? If they have access to this kind of data, which obviously at some point they will, but this can lead to, let's say, them unethically jacking up the prices of their insurance that they sell you, right? Because they know that you have some conditions before you even divulging it to them. Right? So these are the things that we have to be very careful of nowadays. Human autonomy and control. What does that mean? We will come to it in the next slide. Okay. So so the first point that I want to cover is the autonomy. So patients should know and consent to AI use, because end of the day, it is their life that is at stake, right? So it happens at two levels. Is the data being used for testing? If the data is being used for training models, if that is the case, then before they get treated, they should be given a form, whether it is paper or electronic, where they should look at what their data is being used for, right? And only if they consent to it, only then should their data be collected for AI model training or validation. Patients can choose to opt out of it if they want. That is the, at least that is the flexibility that we have to give to participants in research, right? And a lot of times, patients can be paid for their data, right? So that is something that is beginning to change nowadays. So I'm sure many of you here who are participating in research with actual clinical subjects, you will have protocols where subjects come in, get their data collected, and you'll have some sort of amount that you pay them, right? If you're collecting their data, if they're spending time, because eventually they're giving you their time. Right? So a lot of times that does not happen, but there are protocols in place that should be adhered to when it comes to collecting patient data for model training. So AI should enhance care and outcomes, so no harm. Prevent harm by validating AI safety, and we should ensure fair access and performance across the different demographics as much as possible. So now coming to privacy and data protection, there are different rules that have been set in place by the different governing agencies. In EU, it is GDPR. In the US, it is HIPAA. And a lot of the Indian guidelines actually follows the HIPAA guidelines. There has to be consent and de-identification and secure handling of the data sets when they're collected for research. So we discussed what consent is. So you have to get the consent of patients before you can even use their data for model training or model validation. Now de-identification. So what do you mean by de-identification? Anyone? And this is very, very important.
So de-identification means from the data we could identify back the individuals of which the data belongs.
Right. So we want to make sure that we take enough precautions so that this does not happen. So we de-identify the data, we strip the data of all identifying information so that when researchers are working on that data, using that data for model training, there is no scope of them going back and identifying who that patient is. Okay? And for privacy reasons, obviously. And secure handling. So secure handling as in, when data is transferred, a lot of times let's say data is being transferred between two hospitals where de-identification is not needed, which means, doctors in hospital B have to know who the patients are that are being treated in hospital A, but the transfer process has to be secure so that nothing, like while the data is being transferred, there is no loss of identifying information, right? So there are, constantly there are being attacks that are, attacks on our servers, right? So, NIT, you have your servers. There will be attacks that are going on every single day. And there are mechanisms that are in place to prevent attacks so that, data is not leaked. Ethics. Okay, so let me give you an example. So there was this controversy where there was this collaboration between DeepMind and NHS in the UK, where about 1.5 million data samples were shared with DeepMind, but it was later found that de-identification was not done properly. So this obviously led to a lot of litigations, a lot of issues. So these are the things, not just in small places between labs and so on. So Google, DeepMind, and NHS had this issue. So you can see how much this has been a problem, and this can be a problem. Ethics does require clear data governance frameworks, and GDPR, HIPAA, the EU agencies and FDA agencies are actually putting that in place. So let me go into a little bit of more detail regarding what this de-identification problem is and how this can be solved. So what modality is this? X-ray, right? So this is an X-ray scan. So you can see, and this is some viewer. I'm not sure what viewer this is, but this is some viewer that is used in a hospital, and you see there are so many different identifying information here. So first you have the patient name, right? And then you have something called a medical record number. So every patient has some sort of an accession number, some sort of a medical record number. So medical record number is unique. So every patient will have a unique medical record number. Now this medical record number will have different sorts of identifying information associated with it. The date of birth, the exact date of birth of the patient, and the sex of the patient, and you can have, let's say, the place of birth. So you can have so many, the phone numbers. You can have different kinds of identifying information associated with the medical record number. So that's a very essential piece of information. And then you also have information regarding where the patient was treated, right? So usually in radiology images, so radiology images are saved as DICOM scans, and DICOM scans have something called headers. Okay, so these headers are essentially the metadata that you do not see on these images. Right? So if you open up, if you take DICOM scans, you'll have a lot of DICOM scans that you can download from, let's say, TCIA, the TCIA repository. You open that up on 3D Slicer. You go to, there'll be some option there. Some of the in one of the drop-down menus, if you look at file information, you'll see these different DICOM headers, and some of these meta information will be name of the patient, which you will not find any on TCIA because it has been de-identified. Maybe you will have some. If they do not want to de-identify the patient sex, you'll see that information, but you'll also have other information like what is the pixel spacing, right? So 1 pixel, is it 1 millimeter in the real world or 1.5 millimeter in the real world, right? So you'll have that information also. And you might have some treatment information, what kind of treatment was given to the patient. So you don't see this information on the image, but when you go to the metadata, you go to the header files, you will find this information available, right? But a lot of times you will actually have this information embedded in the images. So you see this kind of information, semi-upright, portable, L. So this is not meta information that is available in the header file. This is information that has been sort of overlaid on the images. So a lot of times what can happen, and it depends on the software, you can actually have patient name and other identifying information on the images itself. Right? So here semi-upright, portable, L. So these are probably not that important, right? So even if you have information like this, it could be okay. But if you have patient names embedded into the images, that can be a concern, right? So there are multiple ways of de-identifying these, and we should make sure that the metadata should be scraped, and also if there is patient identifying information embedded, burnt onto these images, those should also be removed. Okay, so just food for thought here. So you have, let's say a particular kind of treatment was given to the patient. Okay, so let's say the patient was treated. So we can go back to our immunotherapy example with these lung CT scans. So let's say this is a CT scan, even though this is an X-ray. So let's say this is some scan, and you have the treatment information embedded on this image. And you would think that, okay, this treatment information is probably not PHI, and it's not PHI, right? So we want to know what the treatment was given to the patient so that we can train a model. And you think that, okay, I have de-identified everything, so now I have removed all this information. I don't know what the patient name is, I don't know the age, I don't know the sex, but I have this treatment information that is embedded on the imaging, and I want to use this image for training. Can I do that? Yeah, how many say yes? So some of you say yes, how many say no? Okay, so why should we not do that? Can we pass the mic there? Yes, you with the black jacket, yes. Why should we not train a model that has the treatment information?
Sir, due to privacy concerns, I mean...
So there is no privacy concern, right?
The patient hasn't given the consent yet.
So let's say the patient has given the consent.
So then we can use, yes.
Do you think we can use it if the patient has given consent?
The patient is given.
How many of you think that it can still be used? Yes or no? 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 Can we have the mic here, please? Oh, wait, there. Mic there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a yes, because
you think
it
it's
can
yes?
improve. Yes.
So yes, it can be used.
If
okay,
the
why
consent
do you think
is given.
Okay, so you say no? Okay, can we have the mic here?
Probably because it can be used for training, so it can alter the training outcome. So the treatment information, if it is having, or maybe like.
So my question is, this treatment information is actually embedded on the imaging. This so whatever treatment TX1, this treatment is there on the image itself. So what problem can it cause?
So like while the model is being trained, this extra information may like misguide the model classifier. So
Yes.
that's the basic issue.
So you have, so this is basically pixel information, right? So if you have pixel information, when a model is being trained, it will start learning from this pixel information on the image. So let's say that we want to distinguish between patients who are responding and non-responding. For some reason, the patients who are responding are given TX1, and for some reason the patient, I mean not for some reason, so let's say that hypothetically we have images for patients who are responding, and most of the patients have been treated with treatment 1, and there are patients who are not responding, and most of the patients have been treated with treatment 2. Now instead of identifying differences on the images, it will start picking differences on the treatment, right? So that is something we want to avoid. So that is why if there is text information on the image that can lead to the model picking up some picking on some batch effect, we should remove that information. So we want to make sure that model is learning from actual the medical imaging data rather than the extraneous, the textual data that is embedded on these images. Is that clear? Okay. So, and here's an example of what we do, and this is what I was saying. You have the accession number, you have the study date, that means when the image was acquired. You have, maybe other kinds of description, there's the name, there's, the sex, the date of birth. So there are so many different kinds of information that are there. And how do we change it? So you can have algorithms where you basically remove everything. You see how the left one is a non-de-identified image, and the right one is a de-identified image. So you can see how in the right image we don't really have this information which could potentially alter the way pixel data is learned by the deep learning model. But you obviously have to assign some ID, right? Because eventually we would want to know if the model predicted that this image belongs to category X, who is that patient that was classified as X? So what we do is we assign pseudo IDs. So if the person's ID, the real ID was XYZ, you will have a pseudo ID ABC, right? So then we need to create this list of pseudo IDs, and then that pseudo ID list is what we work with, and we forget about the real IDs. So in fact, this is something that happens all the time when we collaborate with our clinical researchers. They don't give us what the patient's name is. In fact, this is a very good practice. If you, as a researcher, if you get data from the clinicians and you see that there is patient's name, please tell them, okay, can you de-identify this to and give us the data without the patient's name? Just, you can have some sort of ID that the clinicians can use to link it. So one belongs to patient 1, one belongs to A, 2 belongs to C. So they can have this list, but you should only get the de-identified data. Okay, this is like, I can't, stress enough the need for this. Okay, now federated learning. We did talk a little bit about what federated learning is. Anyone remembers? Are you raising your hand? Are you thinking of raising your hand? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. I think there's a hand here. Yes. What is federated learning, and what is federated learning, and why are we covering federated learning in this ethics of AI lecture?
In fact, it actually solves the major problem in the medical data, which is the privacy concern. So like most of the clinicians, it's in India, actually it's very difficult to get the ethical permission for the uses of medical data. So for that case, like what we can do is, instead of shipping the data from the local server of the hospital, we can actually build a local machine which can train on the local data which is specifically for that location, and then we can put up something like that in multiple locations, and then we can have a server which can aggregate all the local model weights instead of the actual data, which is completely de-identified, and then there is no information, there is no patient information or anything at all. So there is no requirement for the ethical permission from the ethical bodies of that specific country. So there is no violation of rules or anything. So actually it's a very good practice to do. Like it's a kind of we can say that like differential privacy. So we can actually build up on top of this federated learning.
Right. So and the core concept is you train your local models, and you do not. So if you have multiple institutions that are collaborating, you have some centralized server somewhere, and that centralized server is responsible for creating the final model or the final model weights. You don't share it. So one way you could do it is, if you are freely allowed to share data, you would share all the data to a centralized server and do model training there. But we cannot do that because of some ethical concerns. So what we do is we train on our own data at our own site and share the model weights with the centralized server. Now the centralized server will look at the model weights coming from n different participating sites. It will have some rule-based, some sort of aggregation strategy. It will modify the weights given by the different sites and come up with some new weights. It will push the weights back to the site. The sites will retrain the model with the new weights, and the updated weights will go back to the server, and this goes on back and forth till the aggregator is happy. There will be a test set on the aggregator side, right? So till the aggregator is happy that yes, this is where we want to stop, and then the final weights are pushed back to the different sites, right? So you see how we do not share data, but we are still being able to train our model, and also we are not just training the models on our own data, but we are also getting information from other data sets at other places through this weight aggregation, right? So that is what federated learning helps us do. Yes.
Like instead of original images, can we provide that GradCam images or feature maps, like to hide the privacy?
I think that's that's a good question, but that's a very dangerous thing, because I'm sure GradCam images to some extent, like this is actually a very good idea for research, because I'm sure if you take GradCam images, in some way you could identify the nature of the different, the actual underlying distribution of the pixel intensities and the image from GradCam images.
And also we can hide our that privacy thing also, we can take care of it.
No. What I'm saying is we should not do that.
Okay.
Because there is a chance to get the original image back to some extent from the GradCam images, right? Because GradCam images do have some sort of information of the image, right? Because you'll see that where you have hotspots, where you do not have hotspots, in some sense it will reflect the structure of the image.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So it's what I'm saying is it's not a perfect method. There is a chance of re-identification of the image even if you provide the GradCams.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, it's a good thing to try out. You should have that as a research problem. You had something like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Actually, what we thought is when it comes to the 1D signal, like let's say ECG or EEG. So what we thought is, like, instead of directly using the ECG or EEG data, so we could try like something, a transformation, like continuous wavelet transform, which transformed into the time frequency domain of the image. Okay. Like instead of direct image or the patient information, we could transform it into like one type of image, two-dimensional image, and that data can be used for like this kind of model training instead of direct data. Like because federated learning is more often than not it's costly. Yeah. So can we use like a less costliest approach? So we thought about it.
Yeah, so you can do that, and I think that's fine. But I'm not sure. So using the wavelet transforms, if you have your let's say transformed data, is there a chance of getting the original data back? So let's say that you have your wavelet transforms. Yes. Okay. Now you want to share the data with me. If I get your wavelet transforms, is there some way I can go back to your data from the wavelet transforms? There is. Yeah. Right. You can do an inverse transform.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. So it's a similar thing. It's probably easier to even do that with wavelet transforms than with GradCams. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah, but yeah, interesting idea. You should look up papers and see if people have done it. Yeah. Cool. So let's move on. So algorithmic bias, I know we keep coming back to this, but this is again important. AI trained on biased data may harm underrepresented groups. Like I said, there will be diseases that are not well represented, or there will be populations that are not well represented. Also, let's say when you look at foundation models might have been trained with common data sets, or let's say more commonly available populations, demographics, but there will be populations that are not well represented. If that is the case, most likely your foundation models won't do well. Now, there are a couple cases, couple interesting studies, and this sort of ties to the this idea, this GradCam idea. So people have been used, and there was a paper that was published where they have detected patient race just from these images, right? And this is interesting. The race was de-identified. There was no information of the race in the data that was used for model training, but they were able to, this paper that was published, you can look it up, they were able to actually identify what the race of the patient was. And if that is the case, then I'm sure in some sense they could even do further digging and identify what some other information was. So these are risks that are there, and it's not always possible to account for this, but there will be situations like this that occur, but we have to make sure that the data is de-identified to the best extent possible. So how do we mitigate biases? Diverse data sets, subgroup analysis. So if you remember, we, like I said a couple days ago, when you look at these clinical journals, they will have information regarding, they'll have a summary table that says, this is the demographics of the population that I'm training and validating my model on. So when you present your results, you should also present how well the model performed on, let's say, demographics A versus demographics B. Did it perform well on males? Did it not perform well on females, right? So these information, what age group does it really do well? What age group does it completely fail? So if you have these insights, you should provide that. And that's not just true when it comes to publishing your papers. When you're developing a product, if a product like this, and today morning we were, Dr. Baig was talking about CGMs, right? So when CGMs are deployed, they do well, they do really well for, let's say, certain groups of patients and do not do well for certain groups of patients. And there was this question regarding where does it not do well? So if there's more fatty tissue or, some other condition, if it doesn't do well, when you're developing a product and when the product will be used by end users like patients or the doctors, let them know that if you have a particular demographics, it is likely that the error will be high. Or if you have a particular demographics, if the error will be, somewhat, let's say there's a lot of fluctuation, let them know. Because these are the kinds of data that can make your model better, and it can drive adoption and improve trust. So yeah, we should have fairness across all populations to the best extent possible. So a lot of times you'll hear this term, black box. So AI, a lot of people will say that AI is black box. They'll say that AI is magic. It's not. It's basically a rule of a set of mathematical rules. But what we should know is that what is leading to this misconception regarding AI is the fact that there is not enough trust in using these models. So what is the black box problem? So it all comes down to the interpretability and the explainability aspect that we have covered. So many of these models lack explainability. So yes, they perform really well, but if we can include some level of interpretability and explainability into how the model is coming up with a particular decision, that will help drive adoption much faster. So clinicians must understand how AI reaches decisions, not the math behind it, like I said, but to some extent, what are the, let's say, core principles that drive the particular decision. This can aid trust, and we should have informed patient consent and regulatory requirements that are taken into account to demand transparency. So this is the GradCam that one of you was talking about. So what this tells you is you have the X-ray image, but on top of that you see this heat map. So this heat map, you see it's a color map where you have red regions, blue regions, yellow regions. So red regions are the regions where you have high attention, and these high attention regions are the ones where the model is learning most of its information from to decide whether this patient maybe has COVID or not. right? So these attention maps have been a very common method to explain how a model makes its decisions. And you can provide these kinds of explainability techniques to clinicians. So even though GradCams are not the best, a lot of times there's a lot of noise, but still it's a pretty good technique when it comes to deep learning and image analysis. Okay, so accountability and liability, who is responsible for AI-driven errors? We discussed this yesterday. So usually the clinician has to, the clinician retains the ultimate accountability because they are the ones who will be using the systems. And then currently, so even though at times this is unfair on the clinician, so what FDA and EU, what they're trying to do is they're trying to develop these frameworks that have human in the loop oversight. So if a model is making a decision, you have a human in the loop, and then you try to make sure you're doing as much as possible to correct that decision so that the final decision you will have sort of an equal say that the model also has some liability, it's not just the human. So we need post-market AI monitoring and error tracking. So now, one of the aspects that we haven't discussed so far is professional integrity and conflicts of interest. So just before this, before this session started, I was talking to a few of you, and it's seen that over the last few years, the field of radiology, and I believe it's called radiodiagnosis here, you see this sense of fear amongst radiologists or amongst medical students. They don't want to, after their MBBS studies here, they don't want to take up radiology, right? So a lot of this fear stems from the fact that they think models are out to get them, right? That they think that they will be replaced by AI. Right? So that's absolutely not the case. So if that were to be the case, I think it would have already happened by now, right? So what in fact is happening is, and I was actually telling him that, telling actually a few of you, I was there at RSNA a couple months ago, last month in fact, and the vendor floor, which had companies, startup companies, or even OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, and also more traditional healthcare AI companies, 70 to 80% of the product that they were selling were all AI related. Now, interestingly, radiologists, it's not like they were scared of these products, right? So they go there, they talk to them, they try to understand what that product is, and eventually they want to use these products in the clinic. The reason is they want to make their lives easier, right? There are a lot of mundane tasks that radiologists do, right? Detecting, let's say, so chest X-ray scans, a lot of places, the volume of studies are so high that they have to go through hundreds of chest X-ray scans every day. Now, this can lead to physician burnout. So what if you had an AI system that can do an initial level of triaging and then give you, let's say, give you only the pictures, only the images which are, let's say, where there are some, where there's high uncertainty that, or there's high certainty that there is some disease or it's a tricky case, right? So it can reduce the effort of radiologists and they can manage their time. So what can happen? So I'm just thinking of a situation here. You have a bunch of images, you have 500 images, AI goes through it and says that out of these 500 images, it's absolutely sure that 400 images, there is no disease. Out of the 100 images that's remaining, maybe 10 images need the attention of radiologists. So what could be done is, those 400 images that do not have disease, it could go to like a junior radiologist, right, who can go through them, and if they find something interesting, they can flag it to a senior radiologist. So eventually the senior radiologist, instead of having to go through all the 500 images, will probably have to go through maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 images, right? So you see how it can help in reducing their workload, and then they can use that time for something more critical. Right? So this is just one example of how AI will change the workflow. So in fact, Geoffrey Hinton probably, about a decade ago, said that radiologists will be out of jobs. In the sense, he did not in these terms, but he said that AI can replace radiologists. Fast forward 8-9 years, that's not the case. So what's happening now, and it's a cliche now, that radiologists who use AI will be the ones who will replace radiologists who do not use AI, right? So that's what's happening. So now, why is that a conflict of interest? So let's say that in a hospital you have radiologists, but there is a great product out there that can improve efficiency, that can improve the workflow, that can generate better return on investment, but there is a possibility that they will resist the use of AI in their workflow because they think it will take their job away. So that's a conflict of interest, that they don't want systems like this to be there in the clinic. And not just that, I mean, we can't place all the blame on radiologists, right? So not just that, it's the developers who also have a responsibility. So you'll see, and I was talking to you yesterday about how these demos are done in a way that which shows that they solve all the problems in the world. That's not the case, right? So a lot of times developers may overhype results for gathering funding or for promotion or whatever. So that's ethically wrong, right? So especially in this domain, it's ethically completely unacceptable. So ethics demands that we should balance personal incentives with patient benefit. And the collaboration that goes on between data scientists, between machine learning engineers, and between clinicians, it should be done in a way that reduces bias and builds trust. So regulatory frameworks, FDA has an AI ML action plan. So there's a pre-market review of AI devices. The EU has an AI Act, and the MDR requires bias checks, transparency. There's a need for continuous regulatory evolution as the technology develops, and there should be constant audits and clinical validation that is done. And by that, what I mean is you can also have third-party audits, right? It's not just your internal people doing the checks. You can actually have third-party audits for your AI models. So a couple real-world use cases. We discussed this, how there was this issue where DeepMind and NHS, they collaborated, and there was some privacy breach due to opaque data use. But there are examples of successful collaborations. The Mooresfield Eye Hospital and DeepMind had a collaboration. They probably learned from the previous mistakes, and this collaboration actually led to success, and they developed a good explainable AI model. This was, I believe, in the context of ophthalmology. In 2018, we had the first FDA-cleared autonomous AI tool. This was for detecting diabetic retinopathy in primary care. So it has also been shown, and this is a real-world use case where we found bias in dermatology AIs. So in this particular case, there was a training diversity. So researchers, they found that that these AI systems that were developed for melanoma detection, it performed less accurately on images with darker skin, because most likely these models were trained with images that showed lighter skin. Right? So this is another example of how biases can creep in. And if you think about dermatology images, it's very difficult to normalize them. I mean, yes, you could have techniques that can reduce the glare or reflection, but I think it's very difficult to develop something that would take a darker skin and convert it into lighter skin, because if you do that, the nature of the diseases itself, the tumor or whatever you see, the lesion will change, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of research going on in this space to normalize these images, to standardize these images. So then what are the future directions, and what should be the best practices? These models should be ethical by design. So we should start integrating ethics from the development stage itself. So these are, there are a lot of these emerging frameworks like AI for people. You also have a lot of WHO guidelines which provide developers with these ethical checklists. FDA and EU are working on good machine learning practice guidelines. There should be third-party auditing if possible, and this should become more routine. So independent bodies could certify how the AI models that are being deployed, that are currently in the clinic, how they meet the current standards of bias and transparency, while not just before their use, but also while they're used. So continuous evaluation of this. And this can complement the regulatory approval. So the regulatory approval, once it's done, it's done. But we should have quality checks in place while the model is being deployed. Education and governance. So this is very, very important. So we should have, let's say seminars, or we should have educational events where we teach not just the public, but we also teach, the doctors and the stakeholders in the entire workflow, how AI can be helpful, where AI can be dangerous, what are the different things that need to be taken care of when training AI models, deploying AI models. So we should make the public, we should make the stakeholders AI literate, right? Unless you do that, it's very difficult to get acceptance from the community. I mean, yes, so now I'm sure after this workshop, after this GIAN course, you have a much better idea about AI systems, hopefully, than what you did previously, right? And this is something that you could potentially convey to other people to reduce their fears of AI usage, or even to let them know that this is where AI can be helpful. And ethics boards. I'm sure you're aware of this, but educational institutions or research institutions have their own ethics boards, right? So when you start a new project, let's say it deals with preclinical models, mouse models, or if you have human data, you have to get it passed, get it approved by the ethics boards, right? And it's actually a very good experience, and I would recommend, if possible, try to be part of the ethics board. Or let's say if you can shadow, like try to see if you can sit on a few of their meetings and see what they're discussing, right? So you will be surprised what are the different factors that they consider that you don't even think about before you start your experiments. Okay, so ethics boards are very, very important before starting any medical related research. So the goal is to have trustworthy, transparent, and build AI systems that are patient centered. Okay, so to summarize what we saw in the past few slides, so these are the different core principles. We should have transparency and explainability, so basically going from a black box approach to a more glass box approach. Fairness and bias mitigation, if there can be discrimination that is brought about by, let's say, distribution shift by the different populations, we need to address that. Accountability and responsibility, very important. Privacy and data protection, probably the most important thing. Sharing of data, make sure that the appropriate guidelines are followed. So many of you would have tried out Kaggle challenges or other challenges that are out there, and you see that when you download that data set, you won't find any identifying information because someone has gone through that trouble to de-identify it for you and upload that data set, right? And then there should be consistent and continuous human oversight and autonomy. So final recommendation, we should align AI use with bioethics, so autonomy, beneficence, justice, and non-maleficence. Privacy, bias mitigation, explainability, and accountability are the key to developing and deploying the systems. There should be interdisciplinary collaboration and designs that are patient-centered. Always think about the patients when you develop these models. And ethics and innovation must evolve hand in hand. So now the next 5 to 10 minutes, let's discuss, or let's spend some time discussing about the 2 papers that would have been circulated yesterday. So did you get a chance to go through them? Anyone did? Partially is fine. Okay, so I purposefully chose these papers. The first one is on medical imaging. So what are the practical and ethical considerations for Gen AI in medical imaging? And these are really good papers. You should try to go through them if you have time. And the second is ethical considerations of using ChatGPT in healthcare. And this is, I'll come to this in the next slide actually. So let's try to have a few discussions around some of the topics in the next 2-3 slides. So first question to you all, should AI ever be allowed to communicate directly with patients? So before we go to the answer, Have you seen instances of this happening? I heard a yes, so can we have a mic here, please? Okay, so what instances, were you the one who did it?
No, sir. No. I have seen a case where they tried to get solution for the psychological problem, and then ended up like committing suicide because of the solution that it has given.
Right. Yeah,
so there are such cases. Like in recent times, I have seen like 2-3 such cases. So it is not advisable to directly communicate with AI, because there is a chance of committing a mistake.
Yeah.
Even a silliest mistake can lead to human life threatening. So
Excellent point. So over the past few years, there have past few days, past few weeks, there have been a lot of instances like this, and you can just look them up, where people have lost their lives due to something like this. So, and it's not just that. A lot of times, what happens is you can get ChatGPT is not your clinician. You don't provide ChatGPT, even if you provide ChatGPT with as much context as possible, you wouldn't expect that kind of. So what is ChatGPT? It's a large language model that has been trained on a lot of historical data, right? But when a clinician looks at your case, if you remember, the way they diagnose you, it's a very personalized way, right? So they have access to your medical history, which ChatGPT might not, right? They have access to. So when you talk to your clinician, so there's this conversation that's happening between you and your clinician, and they observe this for certain diseases. Obviously, they observe this and they can make a better informed diagnosis. You can't have that with ChatGPT, right? So a lot of times, so there's a lot of misinformation that has spread due to ChatGPT. So always try to refrain, like never do it, never communicate with ChatGPT when it comes to getting clinical decisions. So direct to patient AI risks misinformation. So there can be self-diagnosis which is wrong, so self-misdiagnosis, especially when outputs sound confident but they are wrong. Obviously ChatGPT, the way it has been trained and the way it's designed to give you responses, it sounds as if it's human, but it's not. It's a machine. Both the papers that have been circulated, they have argued that AI should remain clinician mediated, at least in high stakes clinical contexts, until reliability and accountability are proven. So what does informed consent mean when AI is involved? We did discuss this. So let's talk about Gen AI. So what does informed consent mean when Gen AI is involved? Anyone?
So informed consent is like, the information that we are using, the conversation that we have with those LLMs, they are again used back to kind of train the models. So that's the consent that they by default.
Yeah, so they should be asking for that consent, right?
Yes,
if they are doing that, and they do, but it's there somewhere,
yes,
right? Yeah. So patients are rarely told when AI drafts reports or summaries. In fact, what I really liked, so I visited it was my primary care physician a couple months ago. So while she was while we were having these conversations, while she was basically looking at my health history, she told me that, can I have this app on that would record this and then generate these summaries? Right? So which is something I really liked, because it's not like she kept her phone there and it was recording our conversations, right? So this is something, so even though that wouldn't really lead to giving a decision or giving a clinical decision, but she probably wanted to do that because eventually she would have to enter that in her system, right? So it would give her some summary. But patients are rarely told when AI drafts reports or summaries, which is wrong. So ethical practice requires disclosure of AI involvement and limitation, and consent models must evolve beyond traditional checkboxes. And this is what systems like ChatGPT or these other LLMs do. So they'll have checkboxes, but I think this should be made front and center. When you fire up a terminal, a good practice is if the developers can say, okay, there is a chance, there is a possibility that your data will be used to training the model. Do you want to switch it off? So that should be there up and center. So if you are developing models like that, try to make that make that a feature. So can AI be ethically deployed before it is fully understood? And I see a few shake of heads. So I think this is a tricky question, and that's why I wanted to put it up here. It's difficult to answer because understanding the ethical aspects, it can be a very long drawn process. So what I would argue is, yes, we can deploy it, but conditionally, like for certain aspects where we are sure that the ethical parts are taken care of, yes. But if there are aspects of it where ethics can be a big concern, then no. Right? So you've seen that medicine has long used tools without the full mechanistic understanding, right? AI requires operational understanding, known failure modes, monitoring, and rollback mechanisms. We have to be very careful about this. So ethical deployment depends less on interpretability. Yes, interpretability is just one aspect of ethics, but it's not just that. It depends more on the predictable behavior of the system under stress. Okay, so with that, I think we are at the end of our session. We had 12 hopefully very interesting sessions and the hands-on sessions as well. Any questions?
Sir, actually I have a very random idea. I don't know like it is good or bad.
Yeah, random ideas are good. Usually
like
good.
Like instead of using that GradCam images, like
you really want to work on this project, don't you?
But I am exploring, so that's why I'm asking. Like like instead of that original images, like can you can we generate some prototypes from that original image? And like I'm not saying that like we have to make one prototype per class. At least we can select top 10 positive prototype and top 10 negative prototype. And instead of that, all those original image, can we like provide those prototypes for the central server, or like instead of weights also we can like, I think we can do it. Like
so
I don't know.
You could do that, but what do you have in mind regarding how these prototypes are created?
Like like instead of like see, like I can measuring that prototype is a kind of a mean of each and every samples from one class.
Okay.
So like instead of only one prototype, like can we develop some at least like top 10 positive prototype? Positive means you can say like those are the very similar kind of a prototype from the class itself.
Right.
And negative means you can say like feature wise they are very similar, but actually they are not.
Sure. Yeah, we could definitely do something like that. In fact, we had a project that was similar where if you remember the pixel model that we have created for digital pathology images, what we are claiming there in that work is we can generate these images like using GenAI techniques, using diffusion models. We can sort of create these prototypes but using diffusion models, and then you can share those rather than share the actual image. So what the diffusion model does is it takes the representations coming from a foundation model, uses that as a condition to create images that obviously share that same condition but they look different. Right? So something like that.
So another thing is that like instead of original image, can we develop some synthetic images like using some GAN like
so that
method?
was a synthetic image. The pixel work was a synthetic image.
So like that thing also you can do. Like like instead of original image, like if you're like using some synthetic images,
right?
Like kind of like those are not part of from original image, but we are then we can use those
then
images.
We can share
for,
the data rather than model weights.
So like privacy is also I think secured also. So
definitely. That could be done.
So I mean, the question is in continuation with what he was talking. So during generation of synthetic images, so we are just trying to create the similar images out of the model instead of using the original. So is that ethical?
So what was the question? Is the
procedure ethical?
So when you ask your question, is the procedure ethical? Are you asking if the creation of that image is ethical?
No, I mean, so creation of the image to share it, right? So is that ethical?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So the ethics part of it is that we do not want to share the original image, because the original image might have, let's say, if you remember that paper that I spoke about, that you could potentially trace back the race of the patient. But let's say that we have come up with a good GenAI method that we can use to create this synthetic image, and we have done sufficient stress testing to show that using the synthetic image you cannot trace back the race of the patient, then we can share that image, right? So we need to know what ethics aspects is being targeted using the methods that we are proposing.
But I mean, if we look at this technically, what we are doing is while generating those AI-based images, although using diffusion or GIAN or even any of the vision transformers also we can use. So it's like we are just having a representation, and using that we have created the image, which means technically we can again get back the same representation out of those images.
No, so you cannot. So that's the thing, right? So with these diffusion models, so if you create these synthetic images, you cannot trace back, you cannot go back from the synthetic representations and go back to the real image. So that's why this becomes interesting.
No, so but still we are having the similar representation what we had.
So it's just the representation, right? So the representation will have no information regarding, these no PHI information, right? So that is why this is, I'm not saying that this is the only way, but this is one of the ways that we reduce drastically the chance of re-identification. That's my argument, and that's probably his argument as well.
So I mean, what it looks, I mean, I'm just saying it like it looks like photocopying the image and then sharing it, right?
But that's the thing, right? If you look at, and you can try out our pixel method, that photocopy that you're mentioning is very different. It doesn't even look similar to the real image. I mean, to the image that it was photocopied from. Like there are certain aspects of it, maybe cell layouts or something that are preserved, which means the representation is preserved, but the image itself looks different, right? So when you look at that image, so you take the patient and you take the real image that was collected and the synthetic image, the patient can tell you, okay, this is my real image, I don't want this to be shared. The other image, it's a synthetic image, this was not collected from me, it is okay to share it.
But I mean, don't we actually try to create as much realistic image as we can, right? So that was the motive.
We do try to create, so we do try to retain the realism. That's what you're saying. But it's more than the realism; it's the representation of the disease that we are trying to maintain.
Even in the face generation, also we do the similar thing.
Yeah. So face generation, yes, we do the similar thing. But face generation is something that I would say that is more privacy intrusive, right? So if you create a fake image, and if there is even the slightest chance that it look, certain parts of the face of the fake image look like parts of the face of the real image, you can immediately see it. But when it comes to these medical images, it's not like you look at an image and say what the race of the patient is, but the patient can still say that don't share my real images. I'm just talking about from the sharing perspective, right? So if you have a real image and patient tells you, I do not want to share my real image, but yes, you can have a protocol where you generate another image and then share that is fine. That's all that I'm talking about here.
Okay, so I mean, how does regulations recommend such?
There are no regulations now, so that's something that we have to figure out as we develop these systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think you have a question. So there's a question here. Okay. Okay, so we're done. Okay, so thanks everyone. I think Dr. Baig has some announcement, and after that we'll break for lunch. I think that's what he'll announce.
So I hope you had an interesting and interactive session. So I just want to, few things are remaining, just a couple of things. So I request all of you to fill up the feedback forms. So that's required for us. So the volunteers will be actually distributing the forms. So please do fill up these feedback forms. So it will take hardly 5 minutes, so we can wait for that. Other than that, in this next session, we have the valedictory session, which starts at 4 p.m. Before that, there is an exam, I think.
It's a short,
small exam, MCQ exam is there. So the timing, I think the valedictory is at 4.
Will be right before that.
So 3 p.m. will be the exam. We can reconvene at 3 p.m. and start at some point, so that we are in time for the valedictory session. So yeah, what?
Yeah, no, I'm like 3:15. We can start.
Yeah. So around after 3.
Yeah.
So let's meet here at 3 p.m. and please do fill up the feedback forms.
जो भी उस रूम में जा रहा है नहीं आ रहा है, जो भी उस रूम में जा रहा है कोई नीचे नहीं आ रहा है. A very good evening to one and all present over here. Welcome to the valedictory session of the 5-day GIAN course on Artificial Intelligence and Medical Image Informatics for Cross-Scale Disease Characterization and Precision Medicine. As the saying goes, every meaningful journey deserves a moment of reflection at the end, and today we stand at that conclusion. Over the past few days, this program has been truly rewarding. What started the first day as a course with curiosity and anticipations from all of us has now turned into a journey, a learning, a happy collaborations and intellectual exchanges between everyone. It was truly an engaging and insightful and informative session. One of the most remarkable aspects of this course, as I said on the very first day, was the diversity of the participants. We had clinicians, research scholars, industrial professionals, and students from all over India who brought their own perspectives, own experiences, and unique experiences overall. We are honored to have with us today Professor Shishir Kumar Shahu, Local GIAN Coordinator, NIT Rourkela, Professor Devendra Verma, HOD, BM Department, Professor Prateek Prasanna, our chief guest, and Professor Mirza Khalid Baig. I request all the dignitaries to grace the stage, please. Thank you, everyone. To begin with, I would like to honor Dr. Shishir Kumar Shahu for being the backbone of this program. I invite Verma sir to come forward and facilitate Professor Shishir Shahu as a token of appreciation. Thank you, sir. Next, we move on to honoring Professor Prateek Prasanna, sir. He has provided us with all the concepts, the foundational concepts to practical insights. We also thank his research scholar, who is unfortunately not here with us. He has left for his home, Moinak Bhattacharya, for joining us and giving us an extensive hands-on training on the AI/ML course that we learned. To present a token of appreciation, I would request Professor Sahu to kindly come forward and give the token of appreciation to Professor Prateek Prasanna. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Professor Prateek Prasanna to address the gathering and share his overall experience for this course of 5 days.
Thanks, Subhadati. I thought you guys had enough of me already. So respected dignitaries on stage. So first of all, thank you again for having me here, for conducting to conduct this 5-day GIAN course. So I had an amazing time, not just talking about work, talking about research, but also spending time with all of you, outside of this auditorium. So, well, I think I've said everything that I had to say in the last 5 days. So if I were to, just reflect upon the takeaways. So before I entered the class today, I was actually chatting with a few of you. Some of you ended up telling me that, the way this was conducted and what you have taken away from this course at this point. At some point you would actually like to maybe pursue further studies, pursue higher studies, and maybe take up medical image analysis as as a career. So obviously that gives me a lot of pleasure, and hopefully you're able to do that. So by the way, I'm hoping that all of you found this course interesting. And yeah, as you know, like I said, a lot of people think AI is magic. It's not, but it is magical, right? So you can use AI techniques, AI methods to do a lot of things. Like I said in my first day, with power comes great responsibility. So you have the tools at your disposal. It's up to you how to use these tools. But remember, when it comes to the data sets that we collect, whether it is images or whether it's the kinds of biosignals, on the other side of these images, on the other sides of these signals, there is a human being, right? So that's what we should remember. So we have to develop models with compassion. And yes, so don't be afraid of failures. Like I said, there will be rejections. Rejections are part of the journey. But we are here in this field not just to write papers. So eventually we would want to make a difference in the lives of patients, in the quality of life. And yes, through the work that we do, even if we can change for the better the life of even one patient, we should consider that a success in what we do. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we will move on to one of the most awaited moment of this valedictory session, the distribution of the certificates to the participant in recognition of their active participation and commitment to this program. Manishweta, please. Yeah, so once I take the name, kindly come to the dais through the left-hand side. And yeah. So first we'll start with... Okay, so first is Srinivas Rangu. K. Vinit Kumar Reddy. Next we have Manohar. Next we have Qazi Hassan Qazi Azimuddin. Next, Sheikh Sofian. Next, we have Muhammad Anas Siddiqui, Muhammad Azayuddin Siddiqui. Next, we have Abdul Wakil Al Sahab. Next, we have Muhammad Akmal Muhammad Aslam. Next, we have Khan Arif Sanur Khan. Next in line, Jagannath Biswal.
after this.
Now I would request Prateek sir to hand over the certificates to the participants. We have Gyanaranjan Das. Next we have Sai Sarthak Panigrahi. Abhishek Suman. Yuvika Mishra. Swarnalatha Satapathy. Sneha Das. Varun. Sanskriti Rath. Devi Prasad Das. Swati Sangeeta Mahapatra. Shibani Mohanty. Sushri Mishra. Krishna Raj Nandini. Shoma Suchishnata Raut. Priyanka Chaudhary. Now I would request HOD sir to hand over the certificates to the participants. Next is Rituparna Raut. Jianshu Singh. Sairaj Balasaheb Ghule. Aditya Gupta. Nalla Maheshwara Rao. Suchishmita Biswas. Himanshu Bankar. Prateek Ramachandra Chaudhary. Next we have Rishita Sharma. Next we have Deepak Kumar Shahu. Harapriya Biswas Roy. Ipsarani Satapathy. Now I would request Professor Mirza Khalid Baig to hand over the certificates to the participants. Okay. Ayush Patel. Tomogno Chatterjee. तुषार शिर्के. अभिप्सा दास. शोमोजित गायन. साई प्रणव. योगेश कुमार डोगरा. अभिप्सा यहाँ पे आओ, मेरा और मानसविता का नाम अनाउंस कर.
Next we have Shubhradyuti Basu. Manashwita Ghosh.
Yeah, that's the end of our certificate distribution. Last but not the least, I would request Professor Mirza Khalid Baig to come and give a vote of thanks to the audience and close the ceremony.
Thank you very much, Shubhra. So it's a pleasure to actually coordinate this GIAN course. So with this, actually, I must thank the GIAN program, so Global Initiative for Academic Networks, run by the Ministry of Education and the National Coordinator IIT Hyderabad. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the administration of NIT Rourkela, starting from our director, Sir, Professor Rao, and Registrar, Sir, Professor Dhiman, and I cannot, there are not enough words to thank the SRIC department, sponsored research department, who coordinate all the documentations and the organization of the program. Also, the hostel management, chief warden's office, who have organized the stay for our participants, the guest house management for organizing the stay of our guest and as well as few of the participants. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank with my deepest regards to Professor Prateek Prasanna for taking the time out and spending time with us and educating us and enlightening us. And I also want to thank Professor Shishir Kumar Sahu. So sir is instrumental in encouraging us to conduct more and more GIAN courses, and he is coordinating all the GIAN courses that have been conducted under NIT Rourkela. So he has played an instrumental role in running this GIAN program at NIT Rourkela. And my deepest gratitude to Professor Verma, head of the department, Biotechnology and Medical Engineering, for his support and encouragement, and always his blessing and his support in all the programs and all the work that we do. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank our team who have been fantastic in organizing and running the program and helping everyone and making sure that all the things are happening at the right time. I'm happy to say that most of the programs that we have actually planned, it went according to the schedule. As you will know, I don't think hardly maximum 5 minutes or 10 minutes here and there it may have delayed, but most of it ran on time. And last but not the least, of course, you have been amazing, the participants. Because of you, all of you, these sessions have been so enlightening. I was talking to our esteemed speaker. So he also pointed this out that whenever he ran a session, there were a lot of questions from which he got feedback. And he got actually himself also, he engaged well. He felt that it was very engaging for him. So generally, if there is a two-way communication, then only the lectures become engaging. Otherwise, one-way communication, only the speaker speaks, then it becomes a little bit boring for the speaker. So from his energy also, you can see that he's very much in sync with all of you, and the way you have actually, and thank you very much for choosing us, for coming from all the parts of the country. And I hope we get an opportunity again to serve all of you. And I hope to improve. If we run a GIAN course again, I hope to improve upon this. And please, you all have given your feedback. And if any feedback is still there, please do let me know. If any suggestions are there, please do let me know. We will try to address it. With that, actually, I think we can close this GIAN course. I hope it is a success. Thank you very much. So we'll just take few minutes for photographs with all the participants and the dignitaries. So yeah, please let's arrange a photograph. So shall we stand here, and how should we?
I think we should stand over here and the
banner. Yeah. Okay. So who will stand? We all will stand here. Or?
You will stand on the stage.
Yeah.
And we will stand here.
Okay.
And some of us on the side of the stage.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll stand here, sir, and then some participants will come on stage and some will stand over here. Please come forward, please. Sir, please. Some participants can come also. No problem.
Some of you can go
come upstairs.
George, come from the side. Go from that side. So besides